Daeho woke up 3 days after the trial in a medical room that was nicer than most apartments. Soft light filtered through windows showing the palace gardens. Medical equipment hummed quietly in the corner. And the Empress sat in a chair beside his bed reading a book. She looked up when he stirred. "You're awake. How do you feel?" "Like someone took apart my brain and put it back together wrong," Daeho said. Then he noticed the feeling at the edge of his thoughts. A presence that wasn't his own. Cool and calm and undeniably there. "I can feel you. Yes, the psychic bond cannot be undone. I apologize for not asking permission first, but you were dying." She closed her book. "How much do you remember?" "The trial. Kijun. Winning." He sat up slowly, his body protesting. "What happened after?" "You collapsed. Your mind began to fragment from the psychic strain. I stabilized you by creating a permanent mental link between us." She said it calmly, like she was discussing the weather. "It is the deepest form of connection possible between two minds. We are not merged, but we are bound. You will feel my emotional state always, and I will feel yours." "That's very personal," Daeho said quietly. "Yes, it is." She met his eyes. "I could have let you die. It would have solved many problems. But I chose to save you, and in doing so I made a choice about what I want. Which is? You," she said simply. "I want you to stay here, not as a servant bound by debt, but as someone who chooses to be here. With me." Daeho was quiet for a long moment. Through the link he could feel her nervousness. The Empress, ruler of countless worlds, was nervous about his answer. "I'm human," he said finally. "Even with your medical technology, I'll age faster than you. I'll be old before you even look middle-aged. I have calculated that I can extend your lifespan to approximately 200 years with regular treatments. That is enough time." "Enough time for what?" "To live. To experience this," she gestured between them. "I have existed for 3 centuries, Daeho. Most of that time has been alone, trapped by duty and position. You made me remember what it feels like to want something for myself. What about politics? Your court already hated me before. Now that I've defeated Kijun in the trial, it'll be worse." The Empress smiled, and there was steel in it. "Let me tell you what happened while you were unconscious. Kijun has been exiled to a remote colony world. His supporters have either bent knee or been removed from positions of power. The court has been reminded that I am Empress not because of tradition, but because I am powerful enough to rule." She stood and walked to the window. "Several nobles suggested I reward you and send you back to Earth. I informed them that you are under my personal protection and will remain in the palace for as long as you wish. Anyone who disrespects you disrespects me." The message was understood. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." She turned back to him. "For 300 years I have been the perfect Empress. Calculating, distant, always putting the empire first. And I was utterly alone. Do you know what that feels like? To be surrounded by billions of people and still be completely alone." Daeho thought about his years after leaving the military. Drifting from job to job, never staying anywhere long enough to form connections. "Yeah, I know. Then you understand why I cannot let you go. You are the first person in centuries who sees me as Seilwa, not just the Empress, who speaks truth instead of flattery, who cares about my daughter not because she's a princess, but because she's a person worth protecting." She sat on the edge of his bed. "I am giving you a choice. A real one this time. You can leave. I will provide wealth, transport back to Earth, and release you from all obligations. The bond between us will fade over time without reinforcement. You will be free. Or you stay. As my partner. Not as a consort bound by political marriage, not as a servant bound by debt, as someone who chooses to be here because you want to be." "You're an Empress," Daeho said. "I'm a soldier."
How would that even work?
"However we want it to work. I am the Empress. I do not need permission or approval." She took his hand. "But I need your answer. Will you stay?" Daeho looked at their joined hands. Her skin was pale and cool, so different from human warmth. Through the bond he could feel her emotions. Hope, fear, loneliness so deep it hurt. He thought about his life before. The endless jobs, the careful distance he kept from everyone, the way he'd trained himself not to need anyone. And he thought about the last 8 months. Princess Erin's gratitude, the Empress's rare smiles, the feeling of belonging somewhere, even if that somewhere was completely insane. "I'm terrified," he admitted. "Every relationship I've ever had, I've failed. I lost my squad. I couldn't save them. What makes you think I won't fail you too?" Because failure is part of being alive, HFY said softly. I have made countless mistakes in 3 centuries. Decisions that cost lives, policies that caused suffering. But I learned from them. I became better. She squeezed his hand. You are not defined by your past failures, Deho. You are defined by what you choose to do now. What about Princess Erin? She still needs protection. She does, and you will continue to protect her if you wish. But you will do so as family, not just as a guard. She already sees you that way. Through the bond, Deho felt HFY's certainty. She had made her choice. Now she was waiting for his. I don't know what we are, he said slowly. I don't know how to be in a relationship with an Empress. I'll probably make mistakes and embarrass you at important events. I can tolerate mistakes and embarrassment. And I'll probably still be terrible at court politics. I have advisors for politics. I don't need another advisor. I need you. Deho took a deep breath. Then I'll stay. But on one condition. Name it. When we're alone, you're not the Empress. You're just HFY. And I'm just Deho, no titles. No formality. Just 2 people trying to figure this out. She smiled, and through the bond he felt pure joy. I accept your condition. She leaned forward and kissed him. It was gentle and careful, like she was afraid he might break. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright. Welcome home, Deho. 2 years passed. The palace had changed in ways both small and large. Humans were now a common sight among the staff and guards. Earth had become one of the Valyrian Empire's strongest allies, benefiting enormously from trade and technology sharing. And Deho had somehow become a fixture of the court, though he still hated formal events. Princess Erin had grown into a formidable young woman. She'd taken on more responsibilities, preparing to eventually rule. Deho still trained with her twice a week, though she could beat him about half the time now. She'd also developed a sharp political mind that often surprised the court advisors. You're a good teacher, she told him once. Not just in combat, in how to think about problems. I just showed you how soldiers think, Deho said. Exactly. The court thinks in circles and traditions. You think in straight lines toward objectives. It's refreshing. The assassination attempts had stopped after Kijun's exile. The message had been clear. The royal family was protected, and trying to harm them would result in swift consequences. Deho's role had shifted from active bodyguard to something more like a security advisor and trainer, which gave him more time to spend with HFY. Their relationship was strange by any standard. She was an ancient telepathic empress. He was a human soldier with a tendency to speak too bluntly, but somehow it worked. They had dinner together most evenings in her private quarters where she could drop the formal mask. They walked in the gardens late at night when the court was asleep. She taught him about Valyrian art and philosophy. He taught her about Earth history and showed her human movies, which she found fascinating. Your species is obsessed with romance and explosions, she observed once while watching an action film. We contain multitudes, Deho replied, and she'd laughed. The bond between them had deepened over time. He could feel her emotions constantly now, and she could feel his. It should have been invasive, but instead it was comforting. He always knew when she was stressed or lonely. She always knew when he was having nightmares about his past. They helped each other through the hard moments. The court had eventually accepted their relationship, mostly because HFY made it clear that opposition would not be tolerated. Some grumbled in private, but no one was stupid enough to challenge the Empress directly. And after Deho had survived the trial and defeated Kijun, most people treated him with wary respect. He was still training guards when Princess Erin came to find him. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the training yard as he demonstrated a disarming technique to a group of young Valyrian recruits. Guardian Deho, Erin called out. May I speak with you? He dismissed the recruits and walked over. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I just wanted to say thank you. For what? For staying. For protecting me. For making my mother happy, Erin smiled. She's different now. She laughs more. She seems less tired. You did that? I think she did that herself, Deho said. I just gave her a reason to try. Same thing. Erin glanced toward the palace. She's looking for you, by the way. Something about the anniversary of the day you arrived. Deho checked his internal calendar and swore softly. He'd forgotten. I should go. He found HFY in the garden, standing by a fountain that sparkled in the late afternoon light. The investigation took 3 days. 3 days of interrogations, mind scans, and increasing tension throughout the palace. Daeho spent most of it in medical, his side healing but still sore. The Empress visited him every day, which only made the gossip worse. On the 4th day, they found the traitor. Lord Kijun was the Empress's younger brother, a high-ranking noble who controlled a significant portion of the Imperial fleet. He'd been orchestrating the assassination attempts for months, hiring different groups to maintain plausible deniability. His goal was simple: kill Princess Arin, blame it on human incompetence, and use the resulting chaos to seize the throne. When the evidence was presented in the throne room, with the entire court watching, Lord Kijun didn't deny it. "My sister has ruled for too long," he said, his voice carrying across the vast chamber. "She has become obsessed with lesser species, diluting the purity of Valyrian culture. And now, she parades a human guard as if he were something special, showing favor that should go to her own people." The Empress sat on her throne, her face calm, but her eyes burning. "You would kill my daughter because you disagree with my policies?" "I would save the Empire from your weakness," Kijun replied. "The human has clouded your judgment, made you forget who you are." "The human has a name," Daeho said. He stood at the base of the throne, officially present as Princess Arin's guard, but really there because the Empress had insisted. "And I haven't done anything except protect the princess." "You've done far more than that," Kijun said, sneering. "You've seduced the Empress with your primitive charm, made her think you're something special when you're just a soldier with good reflexes." "That's enough," the Empress said, her voice sharp, but Kijun wasn't finished. "Prove me wrong then, sister. Execute the human for his assault on me during the palace attack. He struck a member of the royal family. That's treason by our laws." A murmur ran through the court. Daeho felt his stomach sink. It was true. During the fight, when Kijun's mind-controlled guard had tried to attack the Empress, Daeho had physically pushed Kijun aside. "Technically assault. Technically treason. The human was protecting me," the Empress said. "Then let him prove it," Kijun replied. "I invoke the trial of truth. Let us see whose cause is more just." The court erupted in whispers. The trial of truth was ancient, rarely used. It was part legal proceeding, part psychic battle. Two people would enter a mental arena where lies couldn't exist, and the more justified cause would empower the warrior. "You can't be serious," Princess Arin said, standing from her seat beside the throne. "Guardian Daeho is human. He's not telepathic. Entering the trial would destroy his mind." "Then perhaps he should have thought of that before assaulting me," Kijun said with a smile. Daeho looked at the Empress. Her face was carefully neutral, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. She was trapped. Refusing the trial would look like an admission that Daeho was guilty. Accepting it would likely kill him. "I'll do it," Daeho said. "No," the Empress said immediately. "Yes," Daeho insisted. "If I refuse, it makes you look weak. It gives your enemies ammunition. I won't let that happen." "You don't understand what you're agreeing to," the Empress said, and for the first time since he'd met her, she sounded afraid. "The trial is fought in the psychic realm. Your mind will be exposed to forces it wasn't built to handle. You could die, or worse, you could lose yourself completely." "I've survived worse," Daeho said, though he had no idea if that was true. The Empress stared at him for a long moment, then stood from her throne. "If Guardian Daeho enters the trial, he does so as my champion. I invoke my right as Empress to support him with my own power." Kijun's smile faltered. "That's not traditional." "I am the Empress. I decide tradition." She descended the steps and placed her hand on Daeho's shoulder. "Are you certain about this?" "No," Daeho admitted. "But I'm doing it anyway." She touched his face, a gesture so intimate that the entire court gasped. "Then I will do everything I can to keep you alive." The trial was held at midnight in the palace's oldest chamber. The room was circular, with walls covered in ancient symbols that seemed to glow with their own light. In the center was a pool of liquid that looked like mercury mixed with starlight. Daeho stood on one side of the pool, Lord Kijun on the other. The Empress stood behind Daeho, her hands on his shoulders. He could feel her power flowing into him, a cool current that made his thoughts sharper. "Once you enter the pool, you will be in the psychic realm," the Chief Justice explained. He was an ancient Valyrian with eyes that had seen centuries. "There, your true intentions will be visible to all. Lies become poison. Truth becomes strength. The trial ends when one combatant yields or is destroyed." "What are the rules?" Daeho asked. "There are no rules," the Justice said. Only truth and will. Helpful, Daeho thought. They entered the pool simultaneously. The physical world disappeared. Daeho found himself standing in a space that had no dimensions. No up or down, just endless gray nothing. Then Lord Kijun appeared, and the space began to take shape around them. They stood in a version of the palace throne room, but everything was wrong. The walls were bleeding. The throne was made of bones. And Kijun looked huge, powerful, radiating authority. You see how small you are here, human? Kijun's voice echoed from everywhere. This is my realm, my truth. I am royalty born to rule. You are nothing but a soldier who got lucky. Daeho felt something pressing down on him, trying to make him kneel. The weight of Kijun's conviction, his absolute belief in his own superiority. It was crushing. Then he felt the Empress's presence, a cool hand on his back steadying him. Show him who you are, she whispered in his mind. Daeho pushed back against the pressure. He thought about every mission he'd ever completed, every person he'd protected, every time he'd chosen to stand when it would have been easier to run. His truth might not be as grand as Kijun's, but it was solid, real. The throne room wavered and changed. Now they stood on a battlefield, one Daeho recognized from his military days, a mission that had gone wrong, where he'd lost half his squad. You failed them, Kijun said, pointing at the bodies. You make decisions that get people killed. What right do you have to judge me? The words hit like physical blows because they were true. Daeho had failed people. He carried that guilt every day, but I failed, Daeho said, his voice steady. I made mistakes and people died. I carry that weight, but I learned from it. I became better. I dedicated my life to protecting people so I wouldn't fail again. He stepped forward. You killed innocent people deliberately. You tried to murder your own niece for power, and you feel no guilt at all. The scene shifted again. Now they were in Kijun's memories, and Daeho saw the truth. Dozens of assassination attempts over the years. Manipulation and murder. And underneath it all, a burning jealousy of his sister's power. You're not trying to save the Empire, Daeho said. You just want to be the one in charge. And what do you want? Kijun snarled. The space around them began to collapse, reality fracturing. The Empress? You think she'll keep you once this is over? You're a pet, human. An amusing distraction. I want to keep Princess Erin safe, Daeho said simply. I want to do my job. That's all I've ever wanted. The honesty of it rang through the psychic space like a bell, because it was true. Daeho didn't have grand ambitions. He just wanted to protect people. Kijun attacked then. Psychic force shaped into weapons, blades and flames and crushing pressure. All of it designed to tear Daeho's mind apart. It hurt. God, it hurt worse than anything physical, like someone was peeling back his skull and setting his brain on fire. But Daeho had been hurt before. Pain was familiar. He'd learned long ago how to function through pain, how to push it aside and focus on the mission, and his mission right now was surviving. He couldn't fight back the way Kijun fought. He didn't have psychic powers, but he had something else. He had discipline, years of meditation and mental training, learning to control his thoughts and emotions in combat situations. He shaped that discipline into a shield, not elegant, not powerful, just stubborn refusal to break. Kijun hit him again and again, and Daeho's shield cracked but didn't shatter. The Empress's power helped, reinforcing his defense when it was about to fail. Why won't you break? Kijun screamed. You're just a human. You're not supposed to be this strong. Humans are stubborn, Daeho gasped. It's kind of our thing. He couldn't win this fight through strength, but he could win through endurance. He could outlast Kijun, so he did. Time had no meaning in the psychic realm. The battle might have lasted seconds or hours, but eventually Kijun's attacks became weaker. Desperation crept into his strikes. He'd put everything into overwhelming Daeho quickly, and it hadn't worked. And in the trial of truth, doubt was poison. I am royalty, Kijun said, but his voice wavered. I deserve the throne. Deserve? Daeho said. You tried to murder a child. Your own niece. What kind of ruler does that make you? The throne room reappeared, but now it was clean. Normal. The throne was simple stone, and Kijun looked small standing before it. I just wanted, Kijun started, then stopped. In this place where lies couldn't exist, he couldn't even finish the sentence. Daeho walked toward him, every step an effort. His mind was burning, stretched far beyond what it should handle, but he kept walking. 3 weeks after the attack on Horizon's Gate, Daeho sat in a conference room on Earth watching his career implode in real time. You have to accept, his company's CEO said, not for the first time. The man was sweating despite the climate control. Do you understand what's at stake here? Deho understood perfectly. The Valyrian Empire had invoked something called a debt of honor. According to their ancient laws, anyone who saved royal blood became bound to the royal family until the debt was repaid. It was ceremonial usually, a fancy title, some gifts, maybe a parade. But Empress Seolwa wasn't treating it as ceremonial. She had formally requested that Deho be released from his current contracts to serve as Princess Erin's guardian. Not requested, really. When an empress of the Valyrian Empire made a request, it was more like a polite way of stating what was going to happen. What if I refuse? Deho asked, though he already knew the answer. The CEO's face went red. Then you damage relations between humanity and one of our most important allies. Earth's government is already involved. They've made it very clear that you will accept this position, or you will face consequences. Consequences, Deho repeated flatly. They didn't specify and I didn't ask, the CEO said. Look, Deho, you're a good operator. One of our best. But this is bigger than you, bigger than this company. Just go to Valyris Prime, serve your time, collect your payment, and come back. How bad can it be? Famous last words, Deho thought. 2 days later, he stood in the cargo hold of a Valyrian transport ship, watching Earth shrink behind him. The ship was beautiful, all flowing curves and soft light, but Deho felt like he was being carried toward a prison, a comfortable, wealthy prison, but still a prison. The journey to Valyris Prime took 5 days. Deho spent most of it in his quarters, a room that was larger than his apartment back home. He tried to research Valyrian culture, but the more he read, the more out of place he felt. They were telepaths. They valued harmony and mental discipline. Their society was built on thousands of years of tradition and protocol. He was a soldier who specialized in breaking things and shooting people. This was going to be a disaster. When the ship finally entered orbit around Valyris Prime, Deho pressed his face to the viewport and stared. The planet was beautiful, covered in silver cities that looked like they'd been grown rather than built. Oceans sparkled in shades of purple and blue. 3 moons hung in the sky, each one terraformed and inhabited. This was the heart of an empire that controlled hundreds of worlds. And somehow Deho was supposed to fit in here. The landing platform was crowded with people waiting to see the human who'd saved the princess. Deho walked down the ramp in his dress uniform, feeling every eye on him. Valyrians were tall and he felt short by comparison. They moved with grace and he felt clumsy. They all seemed to know exactly where to stand and what to do, and he was just trying not to trip. Princess Erin was there, looking more composed than she had during the attack. She wore formal robes and a crown that floated above her head without any visible support. Probably telepathic manipulation, Deho guessed. Guardian Deho, she said in Korean, using his language as a sign of respect. Welcome to Valyris Prime. I am glad you accepted my mother's offer. I didn't have much choice, Your Highness, Deho said honestly. A flicker of something crossed her face. Amusement, maybe. Yes, my mother can be quite persuasive when she wishes. That was one word for it, Deho thought. The palace was even more impressive than the planet. It sat on a mountain overlooking the capital city, a structure of white stone and crystal that caught the light of 3 suns. Deho was given quarters in the royal wing, another massive room with a bed that could fit 5 people, and windows that showed a view of the city below. His duties started immediately. He was to accompany Princess Erin whenever she left her chambers. He was to coordinate with the existing guard force, all of whom were Valyrian and most of whom clearly resented him. He was to attend briefings and learn the palace layout and understand the security protocols. It was exhausting, and not in the way combat was exhausting. This was mental exhaustion, the constant effort of trying to fit into a culture he didn't understand. The other guards didn't help. They were polite but cold, answering his questions with minimal words. He overheard one of them talking to another in Valyrian, not realizing Deho's translator implant would pick it up. The human thinks he's special because he got lucky once. He'll make a mistake and then we'll see how tough humanity really is. Deho pretended not to hear. Starting a fight on his first week would be stupid no matter how tempting. Princess Erin at least was kind. She seemed to understand how lost he felt and made an effort to explain things. She told him about Valyrian history, about the telepathic networks that connected their people, about the art and music that shaped their culture. We value harmony above all. she said during one of their walks through the palace gardens. Conflict is seen as a failure of understanding. If two people truly understand each other, they should be able to find agreement. That's a nice idea, GoHFY said. But what about when understanding isn't enough? When people want different things that can't both happen? Erin tilted her head. A gesture he'd learned meant she was thinking. Then we seek compromise, or we defer to those with greater wisdom. And if the wise ones are wrong? She smiled. You ask difficult questions, Guardian GoHFY. It's a habit, he admitted. The assassination attempts hadn't stopped. 2 weeks into his stay, someone tried to poison the princess's food. GoHFY caught it because his human nose picked up a chemical smell that the Valyrian taster missed. 3 days later, a guard who'd been mind-controlled tried to attack Erin during a public appearance. GoHFY disarmed him without killing him, which apparently impressed people. But what really changed things was the night he stopped the drone attack. It was 3 a.m, station time. GoHFY was awake because his sleep schedule still hadn't adjusted to the local day-night cycle. He was doing push-ups in his quarters when he heard something, a soft humming almost below the threshold of hearing. He grabbed his pistol and moved to the window. 3 small drones were approaching the palace, flying low to avoid detection. They were heading straight for Princess Erin's chambers. GoHFY didn't think, he ran. He burst into the princess's room without knocking, startling her awake. Get down! The first drone smashed through the window a second later and GoHFY shot it out of the air. The second one got through and he tackled it, wrestling with the machine that sparked and tried to shock him. His hands got burned, but he managed to crush its power core. The third drone didn't make it through the window. Something invisible grabbed it midair and crushed it like an empty can. GoHFY turned to see Empress HFY standing in the doorway, her hand raised. Her eyes glowed with power, and the air around her seemed to ripple. Are you hurt? She asked, looking at her daughter first, then at GoHFY. I'm fine, Mother, Erin said, though she was shaking. The Empress walked to GoHFY and took his burned hands in hers. You continue to prove your worth, human. Her touch was cool against his burned skin, and he felt that mental pressure again. But this time it wasn't just pressure. It was like a cool breeze running through his thoughts, soothing the pain. His burns started to heal, flesh knitting back together with telepathic assistance. Your mind is loud, the Empress said softly, still holding his hands. Most humans are, but yours especially. So much noise, so much discipline holding it in check, like a fortress built from sheer will. GoHFY didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. The Empress smiled, and he noticed that her courtiers, who'd arrived behind her, all looked deeply uncomfortable. I would speak with you tomorrow, Guardian GoHFY, she said. There are matters we must discuss. The next day, GoHFY was summoned to the Empress's private study. It was a smaller room than he expected, lined with books and artifacts from 1,000 worlds. The Empress sat behind a desk made of crystal, and she gestured for him to sit across from her. You may speak freely here, she said. No one else can hear us. What did you want to discuss, Your Majesty? You, she said simply. You continue to protect my daughter with admirable skill, but I sense you are unhappy here. GoHFY considered lying, then decided against it. I don't fit in this world, Your Majesty. I'm a soldier, not a courtier. Every day I feel like I'm one mistake away from causing an international incident. And yet you stay. I don't have a choice. There is always a choice, the Empress said. I could release you from the debt of honor, send you back to Earth with wealth and honors. Would you prefer that? GoHFY opened his mouth to say yes, then stopped. Would he? Princess Erin was kind and didn't deserve to die. The other guards were decent at ceremony, but terrible at actual protection. If he left, she'd probably be dead within a month. I'll stay, he said quietly. At least until you find someone better. The Empress studied him with those bright, inhuman eyes. Do you know what I find most interesting about humans, Guardian GoHFY? No, Your Majesty. You lie to yourselves constantly. You tell yourself you stay out of duty, out of obligation, but I can feel your emotions. Even if I cannot read your specific thoughts, you care about my daughter. You have adopted her as something to protect. 6 months passed, and GoHFY finally started to feel like he understood how things worked in the palace. The guards still didn't like him much, but they respected his skills after he'd stopped 3 more assassination attempts. Princess Erin had started to relax around him, sometimes joking or asking his opinion on things beyond security. But Empress HFY's behavior was becoming strange. At first it was small things. She would ask him to attend meetings that had nothing to do with security. She would request his presence at dinners where his only job seemed to be sitting there, while diplomats talked about trade agreements. She started calling him to her study for conversations that weren't really about anything important. Daeho tried to tell himself he was imagining it. Empresses didn't become interested in their guards. That was stupid fantasy thinking. Then she asked him to train her personal guard in human combat techniques. "I don't understand, Your Majesty," Daeho said when she made the request. They were in the palace training yard where he'd been teaching Aaron some basic self-defense moves. "Your guards are telepaths. They fight differently than humans do." "Precisely why they should learn," the Empress said. She wore simple training clothes instead of her usual robes, and her hair was tied back. "The enemies who attack my daughter are not all Valyrian. Some are human. Some are from species that do not rely on telepathy. My guards should understand how such beings fight." It made sense, Daeho supposed. So he started teaching classes twice a week. The Valyrian guards were terrible at first, too used to anticipating their opponent's moves through telepathy. When fighting someone whose mind they couldn't read, they struggled. But the Empress attended every class. She didn't participate, just watched from the sidelines, and Daeho could feel her attention on him like a physical weight. "Your mother is acting weird," he told Princess Erin one day. They were reviewing security footage from a recent state dinner, looking for potential threats. Erin glanced at him and something flickered across her face. "Weird how?" "She keeps watching me, asking me to do things that aren't part of my job. It's making the other guards talk." "What are they saying?" "That I'm trying to seduce the Empress for political gain," Daeho said bluntly. Which is insane, obviously. "I'm just a guard." Erin was quiet for a long moment. "Guardian Daeho, can I tell you something in confidence?" "Of course, Your Highness. My mother has ruled the Empire for most of my life. She is brilliant, powerful, and absolutely dedicated to her duty, but I have never seen her show interest in anyone the way she shows interest in you." Daeho felt his stomach drop. "That's not possible. When you first arrived, I thought she was simply grateful that you saved my life. But then she started finding excuses to be near you. She asks about you when you're not present. She smiles more when you're around, and my mother does not smile often. Your Highness, I haven't done anything to encourage this. I've been completely professional." "I know," Erin said gently. "That's probably why she finds you interesting. Everyone else in this palace wants something from her. Power, position, favor. You just want to do your job and be left alone." "What do I do?" "I don't know," Erin admitted. "No one has been in this situation before." The situation got worse 2 weeks later. The Empress invited Daeho to join her for a private dinner. Not a state dinner with hundreds of guests. A private dinner. Just the two of them. Daeho stood outside the dining room, considering whether he could fake a sudden illness. Probably not. Valyrian doctors would scan him and know he was lying. He went inside. The room was smaller than he expected, lit by floating lights that cast a soft glow. The table was set for two, with food that smelled amazing. The Empress sat at one end, wearing a dress of deep green that made her skin seem to glow even brighter. "Please sit," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. Daeho sat, feeling like he was walking into a trap. "You look nervous, Guardian Daeho," the Empress observed. "I'm not sure why I'm here, Your Majesty." "To eat dinner and have a conversation." "Is that so unusual?" "With all respect, yes. You're the Empress. I'm a guard. We don't normally have private dinners." She smiled. "Perhaps I wish to change what is normal." They ate in silence for a while. The food was excellent, though Daeho barely tasted it. Finally, the Empress spoke again. "Tell me about Earth. About your life before you came here." "There's not much to tell, Your Majesty. I was a soldier, then a contractor. I took jobs, completed them, moved on." "Were you happy?" The question caught him off guard. "I don't think about happiness much. I think about doing my job well." "That is not an answer." Daeho set down his fork. "No, I wasn't particularly happy. But I wasn't unhappy either. I just existed, and now? Now I'm confused," he said honestly. "I don't understand why I'm here in this room having this conversation." The Empress stood and walked to the window. Outside, the 3 moons were rising over the city. "I have ruled this empire for 300 years, Guardian Daeho. In that time, I have spoken to millions of people. Diplomats, generals, scholars, artists. Do you know what they all have in common?" "No, Your Majesty. They all want to tell me what I want to hear. They anticipate my desires and shape themselves to meet them. It is exhausting." She turned to face him. You are the first person in longer than I can remember who simply speaks truth. You don't try to read my emotions or predict what I want. You just say what you think, and somehow that is refreshing. I'm not trying to be refreshing, Deho said. I'm just being myself. I know. That's why I find you fascinating. Deho felt like the room was getting smaller. Your Majesty, I'm not sure this is appropriate. I am the Empress, she interrupted, and there was steel in her voice. I decide what is appropriate. She walked closer, and Deho forced himself not to step back. You saved my daughter's life. You have continued to protect her with skill and dedication. You have earned my respect and gratitude. Thank you, Your Majesty. But more than that, she continued, you have made me curious. Your mind is like a fortress, all discipline and control, yet I sense such depth beneath that control. Pain you've never spoken of. Loneliness you pretend doesn't exist. Her hand reached out, not quite touching him. I want to understand you, Guardian Deho. Will you let me? Every instinct in Deho's body screamed danger. This was an Empress, one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Getting involved with her, even in some vague, undefined way, was a terrible idea. I don't think that's a good idea, Your Majesty, he said carefully. Because you are afraid? Because I'm realistic. You're an Empress. I'm a human guard who will be gone as soon as you find someone better. Whatever this is, it can't go anywhere. Perhaps, she said softly, or perhaps you underestimate both yourself and my determination. Before he could respond, alarms started blaring throughout the palace. Deho's training kicked in immediately. Stay here, Your Majesty. Lock the doors. This is my palace. With all respect, I don't care. Stay here. He ran from the room, pulling his pistol as he went. His comm unit was already crackling with reports. Multiple breaches. Armed intruders. Someone had attacked the palace directly. Princess Erin's chambers. They were going for Erin. Deho sprinted through corridors, taking shortcuts he'd memorized during his first weeks. He could hear weapons fire ahead. The distinctive whine of plasma rifles and the sharper crack of magnetic accelerators. He rounded a corner and found 3 Valyrian guards down, their bodies smoking. 5 attackers in heavy armor were trying to cut through the princess's door. They turned when they saw him, and Deho didn't give them time to aim. He shot the first one in the faceplate, the magnetic round punching through and dropping the attacker. The second one got a shot off that missed by inches. Deho rolled, came up firing, and took out another. The remaining 3 rushed him. Deho was good, but he wasn't invincible. One of them got a blade into his side, a burning pain that told him it was coated with something nasty. He headbutted the attacker, felt bones break, and shot another point blank. The last attacker grabbed him in a hold that should have crushed his ribs. Probably would have if Deho hadn't been human. Instead, he gritted his teeth through the pain and fired backward, awkward but effective. The attacker dropped, and Deho collapsed against the wall, blood spreading from his side. The door to Erin's chambers opened, and the princess looked out, her face pale. Guardian Deho! I'm fine, he lied. Are you hurt? No, I'm Mother. Empress Silwa appeared, moving faster than Deho had ever seen her move. She knelt beside him, her hands already glowing with that cool telepathic energy. You foolish, brave man, she said, her voice shaking. Why do you continue to throw yourself into danger? It's my job, Deho managed. It is more than that, and we both know it. Her power flowed into him, knitting torn flesh, purging poison from his blood. It felt like ice water in his veins, uncomfortable but effective. And with her power came something else, a brush of her mind against his. She saw things he'd never told anyone. A mission gone wrong in his military days. Friends who died because he made the wrong call. The guilt he carried like a weight. The reason he took jobs that let him work alone. Protecting people from a distance where failure wouldn't hurt so much. When she pulled back, there were tears on her face. The reception hall of Horizon's Gate Station stretched out like a crystal cathedral in space. Thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds moved through the vast chamber, their voices creating a symphony of alien languages. Chandeliers made of captured starlight hung from the ceiling, casting rainbow patterns across the polished floor. Kang Deho stood near the eastern wall, his eyes constantly moving across the crowd. He wore the dark uniform of a private military contractor, though he'd left his jacket open at the client's request. Something about not looking too aggressive at a peace summit. Deho thought that was stupid, but clients paid him to protect them, not to argue about dress codes. He was 32 years old, average height by human standards, with the lean build of someone who ran more than he lifted weights. His black hair was cut military short and a small scar ran along his jawline. People often said he had an unforgettable face, which suited him fine. Guards should blend in until they're needed. Contact in 60 seconds, a voice said in his earpiece. His team leader, a woman named Park Hyejin, was coordinating from the security room. The Valyrian delegation is entering through the north entrance. Daiho shifted his position slightly, angling himself for a better view of the north doors. The Valyrians were one of the big three powers in this part of the galaxy. Humans had only been in space for 50 years, barely long enough to establish a few colonies and learn which species would tolerate them. The Valyrians had been exploring the stars for thousands of years. The crowd parted as the delegation entered. Daiho understood why immediately. The Valyrians were beautiful in an unsettling way. They stood tall and thin, with pale skin that seemed to glow with its own light. Their eyes were too large, too bright, and when they moved, it was with a grace that made everyone else look clumsy. In the center of the group walked a young woman who could only be Princess Aeryn. She wore robes of silver that flowed like liquid, and her white hair fell past her shoulders. She smiled at the gathered diplomats, but Daiho noticed it didn't reach her eyes. She looked tired, he thought. Or scared, maybe both. His earpiece crackled. All teams, stay alert. Intelligence reports weren't clear about threat level, but... The explosion cut off Hyejin's words. The blast came from the western side of the hall. A plasma charge that vaporized a decorative pillar and sent aliens screaming in every direction. Daiho's body moved before his mind fully processed what was happening. Years of training and too many firefights had built reflexes that didn't need conscious thought. He was running toward the Valyrian delegation when the second blast hit. This one was closer to the princess. Her guards formed a protective circle around her, but Daiho saw what they didn't. Three figures in the panicking crowd weren't running away from the blast. They were moving toward the princess with purpose. Attackers closing on primary, Daiho said into his comm as he sprinted forward. His hand went to his sidearm, a compact rail pistol that used magnetic acceleration instead of chemical propellants. Station security didn't allow chemical weapons. Too much risk of hull breach. The first attacker raised something that looked like a rifle made of ice and black metal. Daiho didn't know what it was, but he knew what rifles did. He fired twice as he ran. The magnetic rounds hit the attacker in the chest, and whatever that species used for blood started spreading across the floor. The Valyrian guards were finally reacting, but they moved too slow. They were telepaths and scholars, Daiho had read in the mission brief. Not warriors. The second attacker fired at Princess Aeryn, and the bolt of energy hit one of her guards instead. The Valyrian guard simply stopped existing, turned to ash in an instant. Daiho slammed into Princess Aeryn from the side, wrapping his arms around her and taking them both to the ground. He felt heat across his left shoulder, smelled his own skin burning. A plasma bolt had grazed him, the kind of hit that would have killed most species outright. Humans were tough in ways that surprised aliens. High pain tolerance, redundant systems, and a body chemistry that could handle a lot of damage before shutting down. He rolled, putting his body between the princess and the shooters, and fired his pistol at the third attacker. The shot took the alien in the face. Not pretty, but effective. Stay down, he said to the princess, though he had no idea if she understood Korean. His translator implant would handle it eventually, but there was lag during high-stress situations. More explosions rocked the hall. This wasn't a simple assassination attempt. This was a coordinated attack with multiple teams. Daiho's mind raced through options. The main exits were blocked by fire and debris. The Valyrian guards were either dead or in shock. His own team was scattered across the station. He grabbed Princess Aeryn's wrist and pulled her up. We need to move, now. She looked at him with those two large eyes, and for a moment he felt something brush against his thoughts. A gentle pressure, like someone knocking on a door in his mind. Then she nodded and followed him. They ran toward the service corridors, Daiho checking corners and shooting at anything that moved toward them with hostile intent. He counted 4 more attackers, different species, different weapons, but all focused on reaching the princess. Someone had paid a lot of money for this hit. A service door appeared ahead and Daiho kicked it open. The corridor beyond was narrow and dark, lined with pipes and electrical conduits. Perfect. Harder to surround them here. Keep close, he said, moving down the corridor with his pistol raised. Behind them, he could hear shouting in multiple languages and the distinctive whine of energy weapons charging. Princess Aeryn stayed right behind him, one hand gripping the back of his uniform. He could feel her shaking. Shock, probably, or fear. He'd seen it before in civilians caught in combat. They moved through 3 more corridors before GoHFY found what he was looking for. A maintenance hub with reinforced doors and a communication panel. He pushed the princess inside and sealed the door behind them. "Stay here," he said, moving to the comm panel. His shoulder was starting to hurt now that the adrenaline was fading. Bad sign. Meant the burn was worse than he'd thought. Before he could call for extraction, the door exploded inward. 2 more attackers, these ones wearing armor that deflected his first shots. GoHFY swore and threw himself at them, using his pistol as a club when the magnetic rounds proved useless against their shields. The fight was brutal and brief. One attacker went down when GoHFY found a weak point in the armor at the neck joint. The other managed to land a hit that cracked 2 of his ribs before GoHFY got behind him and applied a chokehold until the alien stopped moving. He turned to check on the princess and found her standing against the wall, her face pale even by Valyrian standards. But she was alive. That was what mattered. "Extraction team, this is GoHFY," he said into his comm, finally getting the panel working. "I have the princess. We need immediate evac from Maintenance Hub 7 Alpha. "Copy that," Hyejin's voice came back. "Fleet just arrived." "Big fleet. The Empress herself is here." GoHFY looked at Princess Erin, who seemed to understand what that meant even before the translator caught up. Her eyes widened, and she said something in her own language that sounded like relief and worry mixed together. 20 minutes later, they were escorted to a docking bay where a ship that looked like a work of art waited. Soldiers in silver armor formed a corridor, and at the end of it stood a woman who made Princess Erin look ordinary. Empress Seolwa was ancient by human standards, though she looked barely older than her daughter. She wore simple robes of deep blue, and her presence filled the docking bay like gravity from a planet. When she looked at GoHFY, he felt that same mental pressure, but stronger. Like standing in front of a searchlight that could see through walls. The Empress walked to her daughter first, embracing her gently and speaking in rapid Valyrian. Then she turned to GoHFY. "You saved my daughter," she said in perfect Korean, her voice carrying harmonics that human vocal cords couldn't produce. "You have my gratitude, human." GoHFY bowed slightly the way he'd been taught to greet superior officers. "Just doing my job, Your Majesty." The Empress studied him for a long moment, and GoHFY felt distinctly uncomfortable, like she was reading something written on his bones. "I would like to offer you a position," she said finally, "as my daughter's personal guard. Name your price." "Thank you, but I'm under contract with my current company," GoHFY said. "Once this job is done, I have other assignments waiting." The Empress smiled. It was a small expression, barely there, but every Valyrian in the docking bay suddenly looked nervous. "We shall see," she said softly. GoHFY didn't know it then, but his life had just changed forever.